Hey, it's Alex again from SkyRC. Okay, so we're still working on our F-16, and now we've got to the step where we're going to do some of the bottom part of the fuselage. Now, one of the first things we're going to want to do is we're going to get our bottom side of the fuselage, and remember it had a hatch for the battery access, and it had these marks for the doublers. We're going to go ahead and pull the paper off now, since I've already pre-marked the location of these. Okay, and you can see where my etching with the knife is showing up for the hatch, and I've got some little marks there for where the doublers are. Now, normally I would suggest not removing the hatch because it's going to make this piece very flimsy without that big chunk in the center. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut it out, but leave it still in the foam. I want to do this because I etched this side of the foam, and I've also marked this side, but unless I'm mistaken, I've never built this plane before and I've never used doublers on a profile plane, but I'm assuming the doublers are actually going to go onto the inside part. And so if I flip this over and end up having to glue it like this, I'm not going to see my mark anymore for the hatch. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the hatch out now, and then I'm going to glue in the doublers. And again, I'm going to be leaving the hatch in place so that the piece isn't too weak and wobbly, because then you have a much higher chance of cracking it when we're doing all this handling. And like I said before, this is the first time I've ever seen doublers used on a profile plane, but I guess it's the first time for everything. Okay, so now I've got that cut out. So when it comes to removing this thing, it's not going to be a problem. But the doublers are going to go on this side. So the doublers are these little thin strips of foam, and I assume they're there just for structural reasons. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull the plans off. Now when I was pulling the plans off, I had a little oops here. I accidentally snapped the foam, but that's not going to be a big deal. I can just put a little dab of hot glue to fix that. I'm going to do that right now. It's a little dab of hot glue there, and then I'm just going to push it back and be good as new. Now, normally, putting these doublers on is very similar to a laminating process that you would do on a 3D build. Since these are so thin and small, I will go ahead and put these on with hot glue. Now, if these were wider, where you have a lot more surface area, I would suggest using the 3M Super 77 spray glue, where it's a spray adhesive. You would actually spray. If you can't spray both pieces, it's better, but in this case, I don't want to get this whole piece too sticky, so I might just spray the doubler itself and then put it down. But again, since this is so small, I can get away with the hot glue. The idea here is that you don't want to, if you had a super wide piece, so if you had like a big surface area like this front part of the nose, and I was going to double this up with another piece of foam that was the same size, if I'm going to use that much hot glue, the weight of the hot glue is going to start to become a factor, even if you spread it thin. And it can be kind of actually hard to work with, because unless you got the hot glue pretty hot, which again for bare foam is going to be a problem, when you spread it out thin, the hot glue, it's going to dry very quickly, and you may not really get real good adhesion to both parts by the time the glue is drying. So in that case, it's much better to use the spray glue, where you would spray both pieces and then put them together. So again, for this example, we're just going to use hot glue. I'll just do a little bead of hot glue down the entire length of this doubler, and then I'm going to put it down onto the foam. So again, the hot glue, you're going to have to kind of spread it somewhat thin. So I'm just going to put a kind of a medium to small kind of bead all the way down, and then I'm going to turn it upside down. And using my marks, I'm going to go ahead and glue it down to the foam. like that. And now I'm just going to push down, make sure I get as much contact as possible. And you want to make sure you stay just off of that hatch line. And I kind of messed up a little bit. I actually covered up my hatch line a little bit. So I had to slide everything down a little bit to make sure I don't glue that hatch back down. Even if I do end up gluing it down a little bit, a little work with the knife is going to free that right back up. So it's not a big deal. But I'm trying to do the video and make the plan at the same time, so you have to bear with me on some of these little mistakes I'm making. But okay, so now time for the second doubler. I'm pulling the plans off again. Try not to break the piece this time. Okay, so that's gonna go down like that. Get my hot glue. I'm going to run a bead down. I'm actually going to do a little zigzag action to help kind of spread the glue a little bit. I should have done that in the first piece, but okay. So now I'm going to place it down onto the foam. Okay, so now we got it on there. Not perfect. Now I'm looking at the plans again, and it looks like they're actually wanting a little bit of overlap here on the hatch. What this rail, I assume, may end up doing is help give the hatch an area to lay down onto. So I guess in that regard, there's my second mistake of the day. What I'll probably do is I'll see if it's an issue. Again, I normally don't use these doublers with these profile planes, but basically it looks like they want this piece to actually overlap onto the hatch a little bit, so maybe when the hatch closes it's got something to rest on, because remember, this side that we're looking at is going to be the inside of the bottom, so that's actually going to be the bottom when the hatch opens. So again, it shouldn't be a big deal. If I have any issues, I can just trim a little bit of foam later, and then if I need this to rest on anything, which I normally don't, but if the designer wants that, I can always add like a little piece of foam right here next to this to give the hatch something to rest on. Again, it won't really matter in the end product, but there you go. So now the next step is we got the doublers for the side pieces. So it's gonna be the same idea. Remember, this is the ones that I had to do the mirror image cuts and marking so that I could get everything right for the two pieces. So these are much longer, so I'm going to need to be pretty quick with the hot glue gun so I don't start to dry before I get everything put down. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to tack that down. I am curious to see how this all plays out with the doublers, because it may be something I start to add into some of the other planes if it works out, but I've never needed them before. Typically the bottom of the fuselage ends up being pretty strong, so, and there we go. So I got that glued down, same method with the hot glue. And now I got the reverse side. Gonna do the same thing. You can see I have my marks made right there on this side. Okay. Now, while the glue is still wet, it'll actually act as a little bit of a lubricant. You can actually slide the piece around a little bit to help position it. You only got a little bit of time to do that because once it starts to set, you know, it's going to stick and that's going to be the end of that. But while it's wet, you can use it as a little bit of a lubricant to help slide the piece, because this is a pretty long piece, but I was still able to slide it there for a minute without any problems. To be fair, I used a little bit more glue than I wanted to, but I also didn't want it to dry on me too quickly, so a little extra glob in that case gives you a little more time to work with. So there we go, got that tacked down. Now, next step, this is something I've learned from doing a few of these planes. We're going to put all this in. Now, I've already pre-squished all these tabs, just like I did in the last video, to help facilitate the test fit. I have not test fit this yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Now, when I test fit this, I want the doubler side, this side, to face inward to the inside of the plane. Now you have a lot of tabs we're trying out here, so it's good to take your time, make sure everything's in here like you want. Looks like a couple of my tabs need a little bit of adjustment. These last few over here could use a little enlarging. So I'm just going to do that. All right. I'll try one more test fit. All right, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to glue it in, and just like before, we're going to put glue on everything but the notches. So this this area right here, here, and here. Now that's a lot of gluing, and there's a little bit right here too. Now that's a lot of gluing. Now, one last thing before I actually go to put the glue on here, and this is the part I wanted to talk about, is the hatch. This hatch is tapered, and it's also slightly more narrow than the notches are that are actually in the plane themselves, in the plane itself. So what I like to do is I'm going to actually test fit both sides, and then go ahead and put the hatch on the top here, so that I can get an idea, because along most of these planes, these side pieces are actually angled in just a bit. So when you glue them in, if you glue them in vertical and then you go to put your hatch in and your hatch is narrow, you're going to be fighting that glue joint to kind of try to bend these to the side to make them meet. So I'll show you here what I mean. Let me do a test fit on this piece real quick, and then I'll do all the gluing off camera. And it looks like I just need to adjust that last hole. Okay. So now I'm going to put all these in here. Alright. So now basically have everything put in to all the notches. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my hatch, which looks like it's going to fit right about there. Now in this case, it's one of the few times where I don't think I'm going to need much angle at all. It looks like they're pretty much going to be dead straight up and down. So I can go ahead and glue them in like that. Now, on like a lot of planes like the F-22, which has angled inlets, these pieces will actually need to be pushed in like that. It's supposed to straight. It'll be pushed in. And so it's a good idea to do a test fit with the bottom hatch so you can kind of eyeball what kind of angle you need. And then when you go and glue them in, you just kind of glue them at about that angle. And then just, you know, when you do the first one, just make the other one symmetrical. And then if you're not exactly right, it's not a big deal because you're going to be, you know, most of the way there to the angle you want. You know, but if you were to glue them in straight and you're doing an F-22 and then they need to be at like a 30-degree angle, you're going to be fighting that glue joint trying to make it meet so that the hatch will actually go on and seal properly. And you don't want to be doing that. So like I said, if you can, do a test fit, dry, you get an idea what the angle will need to be, and then when you glue them in, kind of glue them in at an angle and hold them while the glue dries. Then when you go to put your hatch on, you're already going to be most of the way there. And then the important thing at that point, just when you glue these in, just to make sure when you glue the first one, you make the second one the symmetrical just by eyeballing it, and then you put in your hatch. And you may still need to make a slight adjustment, but it's not going to be that bad. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the sides in, and then we'll come back when I glue the bottom fuselage on. Okay, so we have our side fuselage pieces glued on. You can see they came out pretty straight. I went ahead and added a glue fillet. You can kind of see the shininess. Oops, sorry. You can see the shininess kind of here. I added a glue fillet on the inside and outside of both left and right side of the fuselage. I will say one issue I could see, since this is a very long run of glue, I actually had to break this down into two halves with glue in it. So I glued the first half up to about here, put it down, and then I glued the second half. It wasn't really a big deal. Because the paper is off, you have a lot of flexibility with both the fuselage and the sides, so you can get away with that. You can kind of move this out of the way, lay a bead of glue down, and then put it back down to do the second half. If you were to have kept the paper on, you're going to have to lay that glue down probably pretty thick and pretty quickly to have time to do the whole piece. Because it's not going to give you a whole lot of grace. I will also say, because this piece is curved, you can see how it has a curve to it from front to back. It is not straight. You will have to, if you're going to leave the paper on for this piece, you are going to have to take it off of the inside on both of these to allow you to do that curve. Because if you have the paper on this side and you try to do this bend, you are probably going to crease your foam. Because of the paper. So if you're going to leave the paper on and do this airplane with a curve like this, pull the paper off of the inside edge. You can probably leave it on the doubler, but pull it off the inside edge of the fuselage side and have the paper on the outside, and that should naturally want to curve the piece in that direction. So I went ahead and added my glue fillets. So now the next step before we put the hatch on is there's actually a little tiny piece, lower rear fuse. This pull the plans off. Alright, so this gives the hatch something to rest on back here. Now the way it goes on is like this. So you're gonna this notch is gonna end up being for the hatch to go on, and you see this has a little recess cut out here so that it'll sit nice and flat. And you'll know that you're doing it right because there's a little relief here on the back, and the relief here on the back should be equal to the relief here and to the one for the bottom right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue this on. You want this to be as straight as possible. I'm gonna glue this on, and then we're gonna do the hatch. Actually, and you want to put glue. You want to put glue here and here. I'm putting a pretty good dab of it because there's not a whole lot of contact surface back here, and I want to make sure that this piece is on here nice and firm. And take off some of the excess here. It's a cooler day, so the glue is not getting quite as hot as usual. You can kind of see that right there. So I'm going to just, well, it looks like actually that's pretty straight. So I'll go ahead and put a glue fillet, and then we'll move on to the hatch. And remember, you want these glue fillets to contact both surfaces in the corner that you're putting them on, but not be too excessive because it's just going to add extra weight if you use too much glue. Again, for this profile planes, weight isn't a huge concern. And if you're building a plane where it is a big concern, you're probably going to be using Gorilla Glue, which will require some different techniques to try to get the seams to be nice and pretty. But okay, so we have our rear piece on, so now the hatch is going to go on. I did have to do a little knife work here to actually release this hatch because it was kind of glued on. I guess if I were going to do this again, if I were to get a do-over on this piece, obviously I would have this one in the right place because it's supposed to actually be a little bit more this way. It's supposed to overlap the hatch, I presume, to give the hatch a place to rest on, as well as just kind of stiffen up this whole piece. So this piece should actually go a little bit more this way. And you really probably don't need to try to emphasize not having any glue on the inside edge of the two pieces. That way the hatch won't get glued down. Because I had to go in here with my knife and kind of cut away at it a little bit to release it from the hot glue that I had spread on the other side. So little tip there. But all right. So just like with everything else, we're going to do a test fit. Make sure this fits on here nice and good. I'm going to do the center first, and that is actually pretty nice. And then look at the edges, and looks pretty good there. And there. And there, and there. Yeah, I think that's all pretty workable. Now, when you glue these in, it's best to start from the center. So I'm going to glue the center first. And what I'm going to do is actually lay the glue onto the inside of the fuselage. So I'm going to put glue here, and here, and here, and here. Not on the notch itself, but just around it. And I'm going to put that on first. Let that set, and then I'll probably do, you can do it one or two ways. You can either glue the one side at a time and then do the other side, but it's probably better to actually work in sections and work your way down. That way the piece will stay nice and symmetrical all the way down. So that's probably the way I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and, that's going to take probably both hands and a little more work on my part, so I won't video that, but I'm going to put glue here and just kind of work both sides and work my way down. Since I've already got the middle done, work both sides, work my way down, and glue the hatch all the way down, and then we'll pick it back up.